This is some of the most chilling paranormal body cam footage you will ever see. Late one night, a woman got an alert that her Airbnb's door had been opened. No one was supposed to be there, so she called 911 to report a break-in. Officers arrive and begin searching the house for intruders, and what they find is terrifying. Take a look.
Anyone inside?
The officers hear loud thumps coming from empty rooms. The officer continues searching and then sees this.
Police! Anyone inside, make yourself known.
And again, he finds the place empty. Officers eventually left as the place was completely empty, but couldn't explain how that door opened on its own or who was making those noises. We don't give officers enough credit. When everyone is running out, they're running in. Either way, this guy deserves a raise. What are your thoughts on this paranormal footage?
This is said to be the scariest video on the internet. It's of a possessed lady walking up the side of a building.
I have a really scary story time. I highly suggest you put your AirPods on or headphones or whatnot. Don't be like me. Don't have this playing out in the open. The person who submitted this is so freaked out by this story that they don't want me to tag them or even mention where they're from. So we're gonna call her Lucy. And for those of you guys that are saying that if you play those paranormal games when you're young that nothing will happen, this story will change your mind. So when Lucy was about 10 years old, she was at her grandmother's house with her cousin. They were bored, so they decided to play this paranormal game called Compass. The game consists of writing the alphabet and writing yes, no, and goodbye, but instead of using the planchette, you're using a compass. The minute they started to play the game, Lucy automatically felt this heaviness in the room. It was almost like the room was just slowly shrinking. They continued on with the game and started to ask it questions, but it wasn't really saying much. Then out of nowhere, Lucy's cousin just started laughing uncontrollably. So much so that Lucy decided that that was the end. Lucy's cousin asked the game if she could leave, and the game responded with yes. But when Lucy asked if she could leave, the game automatically said no. From that point forward, Lucy knew that her life would never ever be the same. She continued to ask the game several times if she could leave, and the game just continued to say no, no, no. It got to the point that they both got scared, and Lucy's cousin took the paper, ripped it up, and just threw it away. After they threw the game, it was almost like time stood still until Lucy looked over out the window and saw a man standing there dressed in black with his eyes completely blacked out. After that, Lucy and her cousin decided to never speak of it ever again and to pretend like it never happened. But this would not be the end of this. 2 years later, Lucy and her cousin were back at her grandmother's house. The whole family was sitting around the dining room table telling stories when Lucy's aunt mentioned that 2 years ago, around the same time that Lucy and her cousin played the game, she had a horrifying experience. She begins to tell them that one night while she was sleeping, she felt like someone was tickling her feet. She decided to ignore it until something pulled her sheets off of her and under the bed, at which point she woke up, looked, and saw a man standing there dressed in black with completely blacked out eyes. After hearing this, Lucy and her cousin decided to break their silence and come clean with what they had done 2 years prior. They were immediately scolded by their family for even playing that game and welcoming this thing into the house. Lucy also came forward and said that from the day they played that game, there has not been a night that she has not suffered from sleep paralysis and woken up to a man standing there watching her with the blackout eyes. I'm gonna have to do a part 2. So this is part 2 of why you should never play those paranormal games. So after Lucy came clean, her cousin also came clean and said that there has not been a day that has gone by that he hasn't also had an experience with the same man. Now fast forward to the year 2020, Lucy is now an adult. Her cousin denies that the whole thing ever happened. Like, he refuses to believe that it happened. He says that it was a figment of their imagination and they made the whole thing up. One day Lucy brought it up to him. He became weirdly upset, like over the top upset. He just started yelling at the top of his lungs, saying that he never effing existed. Stop bringing him up. It just never happened. And he just stormed off into the next room. He wouldn't let go until Lucy also admitted that the whole thing was completely made up. Lucy, to make him happy, decided to just go along with him, and she said, okay, you're right, he never existed. But the minute she said this, she felt this like heaviness on top of her, and she knew she messed up. Lucy still couldn't understand why her cousin was so upset. It was almost like something was really bothering him, and this was just his way of being able to cope with it. Now, days later, Lucy's cleaning her house when one of the frames on her wall falls off. She doesn't think anything of it and just assumes that it just fell off on its own, when a couple minutes later, another frame with her whole family on it falls off and hits the ground. Now that night, even though Lucy wasn't tired, for whatever reason, she felt like she couldn't keep her eyes open. Like, there was this heaviness just bringing them down. No matter how hard she tried and how hard she tried to fight against it, she could not keep her eyes open. In case you didn't know, if you ever feel that way and you have absolutely no explanation as to why you're so tired out of nowhere, it is time for you to start praying and start cleansing, because there's something nearby that wants to make you vulnerable, and that is, of course, in your sleep. Lucy, of course, ends up falling asleep, and the minute she closed her eyes, she was almost like in a trance. She sees the man standing there at the foot of her bed, dressed in black with the black out eyes. She immediately starts screaming, "You don't exist. You're not real. You never existed." This figure just stood there while Lucy was pretty much screaming at the top of her lungs and didn't move. He just very calmly stood there and watched her. Then slowly walked up to her right next to her ear and whispered, "I exist. I always did." Right away, Lucy wakes up and it's 5 in the morning.
Have you ever heard the terrifying story of the Smiling Man? The supposedly true story originated on Reddit a few years ago. A guy lived in a major city and liked to take long walks at night. He enjoyed the time alone as no one was usually out, until one evening, everything changed. He was out on one of his usual night walks when he noticed a silhouette of a man at the other end of the road. He was dancing strangely, almost in a waltz, but with every move, the man would end with a step forward. He appeared to be dance walking towards him. As he got closer, he saw the man's face. His eyes were maniacally wide open, looking up at the sky, and his mouth was formed in a painfully wide, cartoon-like smile. The guy quickly makes his way over to the other side of the street, giving the strange man room to pass him. He keeps walking, focusing on the sidewalk ahead of him, when suddenly, he froze as he looked over to find the smiling man had stopped dancing. He was now facing him, standing with one foot in the street, completely parallel to the guy. Still smiling, but wasn't moving. The guy starts booking it down the street to put some distance between them. He turned back to find the street empty, and he's relieved for a second, until he notices him again. The smiling, dancing man had crossed the street to his side and was slightly crouched down. The guy, frozen in fear, stood there and just stared at him. When suddenly, the smiling man started moving towards him. He took giant, exaggerated, tiptoed steps as if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone, except he was moving really quickly. The guy, completely terrified at this point, screams out, "What do you want?" The smiling man stands there for a while, then slowly starts to dance walk in the opposite direction. The guy stood there and watched him until he was out of sight. But then he realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore. The smiling man had changed directions and was running straight towards him with that same maniacal smile. The guy ran all the way home, afraid to look back at any point. When he got there, he turned around to find the smiling, dancing man was nowhere to be found. And the guy never took a walk alone at night ever again. I'll be sleeping with my nightlight tonight. How about you?
The US government finally admitted that there are aliens yesterday.
What?
What? No way.
Dude, they had this hearing, right, where this guy in the military came out, talked about the fact that for the past like 40 years, we have had operations going on to like retrieve crashed UFOs and reverse engineer the technology of them.
What?
He said that there were organic material found in those spacecraft, but it's like living organics and non-human organics found in these crashed ships.
That's crazy. It's like publicly like broadcasted?
Yes. Everywhere. AOC was there asking questions. She was like, we would like to know like names of all these different people that have been like keeping this from us and all this stuff. And he was like, I will give you a specific list of names and everything. They asked out locations where UFOs might be housed, and he said, after this, I'll give you specific locations on where certain vehicles are housed.
No good.
They asked him if anyone ever got hurt, like any of his colleagues, like in any of these incidents, and he said yes. And they asked, UFO or from the government? And he said both instantly. As soon as the question left their mouth, instantly answered, no hesitation.